I have that data, but we haven't put it together yet.
What's the difference between 16 and 20 or 24, right? But what's the time course of that? Is that something that has been increasing for all universities? Or
well, clearly medical care spending for all universities has been going up. At the same time, you know, universities are also trying to push more of that. They're trying to they try and shift that cost off onto the employees. But you know, I think there's no doubt probably that they've been bearing some of that increase. So if you look overall at compensation, I think there is a slight rise in you know, say healthcare spending relative to salaries just in general, but to some degree, you know, they keep on raising deductibles, out of pocket, drug co-pays, and all of these are ways of trying to control that and, you know, to shift the cost increases onto, you know, employees. I mean, and if you look at that in a number of cases, you could probably see that, you know, especially I guess after you adjust for inflation, that, you know, faculty salaries in some cases probably are actually going down because, you know, not only your salary's not going up, but then you're paying more for health care and prices are going up. And you put all that together, and so your, you know, real compensation is going down.
Question for you as well. It goes back to maybe the beginning of your talk where you were mentioning the liquid net assets of 169.5. My question is about, is there a state law that says that Ohio universities have to keep a certain amount of liquid net assets? No. There isn't. Okay.
There's nothing about that. Well, I mean, the one thing is that if there's no state law, but they need to look at those Senate Bill 6 ratios, because if they get down to 1.75, your trustees are not going to be happy campers because the governor is going to replace them. It's going to put you in receivership. So in that sense, there's no like dollar limit, but if you since that's a part of, that's a big part of, I mean, 2 out of the 3 numbers that go into calculating that involve your expendable net assets, most of which are these, you know, liquid net assets. And so there is some level of reserves that must be kept, but you have to kind of figure out what that is. It's something to do in relation to your debt.
Right.
Like the more debt you have, the more reserves you need. It also has to do with how big your operating expenses are. The bigger your operating expenses, the more reserves you need.
A question. Higher education is becoming more and more scrutinized by non-educators. And in terms of, Bowling Green's using 18% of the operating expenses go to salary, employee compensation. What about private industry? Firms that employ professionals, how much of their operating expenses? So I would say like IBM, or
well, you know, I think it really, that depends, and that number, if I did have a number on this that I think I actually put in the testimony, I think it was probably before the House, because I actually looked out there, and looking at the private sector alone is actually not a good indicator. You should really need to look at the private sector in firms that are large firms, because, you know, this is not, I got news for you, a mom and pop operation here. This is not a small business. And so when you compare, you know, what are you like, you got to look at, you know, what are your benefits like, do you think, relative to somebody like Google? Well, I got a feeling that their benefits are a little bit better than all of ours. From what I hear, there's, you know, a rumor going around to that effect. You know, that is, and there gets to be kind of a tricky question here. You know, public employees have really been beaten up over these benefits, over our pensions and the health care benefits, and et cetera. You know, one of the things that the kind of analysis that we did when we testified on Senate Bill 6 was to show that, especially once you take into account the level of education of public employees, that our overall compensation, not only our salaries, is below what we would earn in the private sector. That for people who are as highly educated and skilled as we are, you know, we would have higher salaries and better benefits in the private sector. And sort of one of the big myths, I know we really get beaten up on our pensions, but when you stop to look at it, even comparing what we're getting in Ohio at state universities compared to what other universities, private universities, are getting, look at it this way. We do not get Social Security, which most people don't even understand. There is, if we went to a completely defined contribution plan, which some of you may be on, if you've selected the alternative retirement plan and you're doing like TIA, CREF or something like that, that's it for you. You don't have Social Security as a backstop. There's no like, this is your minimum income that you can count on that's at least maybe going to feed you when you retire. That's 6.2% that every employer in the private sector is paying, 6.2%. At most of these other state universities where they don't have the rich pensions that we have, they're paying Social Security. On top of Social Security, the worst ones are paying another 8%. And the best ones are paying 10 or 11% more into pension. That's what the university is paying. So the public pensions in Ohio are a bargain because the employer is only paying 14%. At a minimum, at other places, they're paying 14.2, and there's a lot of them out there where they're paying 16 just for pension. So this myth that somehow we have this really rich public pension plan, you know what they do is they pick out a few cases, and they're usually people who are former administrators or high up who end up, you know, double dipping or what?
Carol Cartwright.
Right, who, you know, and you know, the public gets outraged about that, but, you know, actually, for example, the average salary of a public employee in Ohio was just like right around $40,000 a year. And of course, you know what that means is that there's a lot of public, now not professors, but there's a lot of public employees here, because it's a whole issue of public employees, and we're kind of caught up in that, you know, are making a lot less money than that. And, you know, to me, it was really, and this is kind of off the subject, and you can shut me up on this anytime you want, but, you know, to me, when I listen to some of these people testify at the Senate Bill 5 hearings, yeah, Senate Bill 5, you know, and I heard, like, these, you know, school custodians and people who serve school lunches, people who drive the school buses, the social workers who go in and get abused kids. These are not people who make a lot of money. So, you know, beating public employees up over our pensions is really, you know, especially in Ohio, where we do not get, and I think most of the public doesn't understand it. They don't understand because we've just done, you know, as our usual way, a bad job of really educating the public over this, that we don't get Social Security.
When we were at a rally in Dayton, there were public employees there from other agencies, and we were surprised at the number of people who work for social service agencies, such as managing food stamps, who had to collect them themselves because their salaries were that low. I mean, it was really pretty shocking to actually hear people talk about how little they were getting paid.
Well, all right. Thank you all for staying, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, Reed.